All right, we're going to go in depth about our conversations now about Muslims in the last night's debate. It was a big topic of conversations. Joining me now is foreign policy analyst Rula Jebreal. Her latest book is called Miran. Also with me, Ahmed Shihab Eldin, a correspondent for Vice on HBO. Hello to both of you. Rula, you're first. Last night's GOP debate centered around national security, terrorism. So what did you think of the overall tone of the debate last night and the discussion?
I think Baghdadi was celebrating in Raqqa, the capital of ISIS. I think he was very happy because basically what they were saying, we're in war with Islam, and they treated all Muslims as a potential threat. And the idea of bombarding, carpet bombing everybody, and also killing the relatives of terrorists, abrogation constitutional right. We're not sure they deserve these rights or not. I mean, they're treating them as...
But not all of them were. Not all of them.
I mean, I'm talking about the overwhelming majority, because what Trump is doing, actually, the anti-Muslim remarks are being, considered as normal or as a policy eventually template. And they're forcing the other GOP candidates to respond on these remarks. For example, banning all Muslims, and other GOP are considering and looking at this as if like, yeah, maybe we can think about it.
As I watch the other GOP members, and from what I've heard them say, they're the ones who are saying they don't like Donald Trump's plan. He seems to be pretty much the only one who's on board with banning Muslims, at least temporarily.
Look, when you call refugees rabid dogs, and you call Muslims all kind of names, and then and then you say, we want only Christians, we don't want Muslims because there's something wrong with Muslims. You're criminalizing an entire group of people. You're actually you are marginalizing them, and you're feeding to this warmonger, this fear, and this prejudice that plays into the hands of ISIS.
Ahmed, I want to get your reaction. What was your reaction to last night's debate?
Well, Don, the entire premise of this debate was based on fear-mongering, was based on hate speech, and was not based on the facts. It was based on the manipulation of the public's perception of fear. And so it shouldn't come as a surprise that Muslims, like I would imagine many Americans, would react in fear. I mean, you had Santorum saying that Islam is not a normal religion and therefore shouldn't be granted the same constitutional protections as other religions. You had Huckabee come out and say, that he wants more massive surveillance of mosques, and Carson adding to that supermarkets should be surveilled. This is not just a Trump problem. It was really kind of disturbing to witness what was happening on that stage. A lot of tough talk, a lot of talk about strength, but no real discussion of policy and nuance. I mean, Carson, a neurosurgeon, a man who has pledged and taken an oath to protect and save innocent lives, kind of proud and boasting about the fact that he's tough enough to look over the fact that hundreds of thousands of children might die with this carpet bombing and this saturation bombing and all these bizarre terms. I mean, just the terminology. If you look at the fact that I think 81 times the word terror or terrorist or terrorism was used. The word attack was used 50 times. And, if this was a debate about how to keep America safe, if this was a debate about how to protect America...
But Ahmed, with all due respect, the debate... Hang on.
Please.
With all due respect, the debate was about national security, and people are concerned about national security. It wasn't about domestic security. It was about national security, and terrorism is an issue.
The fear is legitimate.
Does it keep us safe, though, to discuss these sorts of things in the terms that were being discussed, without any real...
But how do we talk about terrorism without saying terror? That's my point in that.
But nobody is asking.
We can talk about terrorism, but Don, why don't we talk about all the other things that don't keep us safe here in America? And when we do talk about terrorism, let's be smart about it. Jeb Bush was the only candidate that I think said something that none of the presidential candidates were really doing, which was, let's think first and be smart. That wasn't apparent to me yesterday.
All right, well, let's listen to some of it and then we'll discuss. Here's some of it last night.
I would be very, very firm with families. And frankly, that will make people think, because they may not care much about their lives, but they do care, believe it or not, about their families' lives.
Islam is different. I know this is going to come as a shock to a lot of people, and I mean that sincerely. Islam is not just a religion. It is also a political governing structure.
If Islam is as wonderful and peaceful as its adherents say, shouldn't they be begging us to all come in and listen to these peaceful sermons? Shouldn't they be begging us all to come and listen and bring the FBI so we'd all want to convert to Islam?
This is horrifying. This is really, look, the piece that we actually didn't hear was when I think Ted Cruz was nostalgic for Arab dictators. This is racism. This is pure bigotry. And because some of them are condemning Trump, we're thinking that this is actually, they are moderate, or even Trump is expanding the far right. So whoever is condemning Trump is moderate. But what you're hearing from these people is a criminalization of an entire group of people, something that actually we heard elsewhere. We heard in Europe before World War II. And it's just simply something that would have never been acceptable in our society. There's something sick about this kind of debate.
All right, Ted Cruz now, listen.
Well, I'm reminded of what FDR's grandfather said. He said, all horse thieves are Democrats, but not all Democrats are horse thieves. In this instance, there are millions of peaceful Muslims across the world in countries like India, where there is not the problems we are seeing in nations that are controlled, have territory controlled by Al-Qaeda or ISIS, and we should direct at the problem, focus on the problem, and defeat radical Islamic terrorism. It's not a war on a faith, it's a war on a political and theocratic ideology that seeks to murder us.
So Ahmed, he's not missing a chance to take, the big Democrats, talking about Democrats. He didn't make that distinction between terrorists, though, and Muslims. Do you welcome that sort of statement? He's trying to make a distinction between terrorism and Islam.
With all due respect to Senator Cruz, it's very disturbing because he's not just factually incorrect. I mean, there have been several terrorist attacks in recent history in India. But, to say all Muslims, to say all terrorists are Muslims, even while conceding that not all Muslims are terrorists, is very unproductive and very offensive and does not.
But that's not what he said, though. He didn't say that.
Well,
he said that all Democrats are horse traders. He's using another analogy, but he's saying that we should not have a war against people with Islam.
But he also previously said that about Muslims. But even beyond that, Don, I mean, if you just look at the kind of discourse and the way in which it's been accepted to the point where we had a 2-hour debate that I agree with you. Perhaps, we should be talking about these issues, but we should be talking about them in the context of all the other issues that also threaten us. I mean, if you look at the shooting at San Bernardino, those were guns that were used. We don't talk about guns. Guns was mentioned 0 times. Now we found out, from intelligence and government authorities that actually, the shooters behind the San Bernardino were actually not posting on social media, and we're not part of ISIS, and we're not supporting. I mean, there's just such a level of perception that is distorted, and that it can be so openly discussed. I mean, I found it to be really troubling. And then, quite frankly, at the end, there was that comment about from Cruz, I believe, about Syrian refugees, how up until 2013 we had never experienced this kind of refugee crisis, and that it kind of took us by storm, and that he used to believe that refugees, or we're accustomed to believing that refugees are escaping or fleeing from oppression or communism.
Ahmed, so go ahead.
But from oppression, where are those Syrian refugees escaping from, if not oppression?
Yeah. But also, who's fighting ISIS today? There are the Muslims who are fighting ISIS, who are dying are Muslims. If you alienate the same coalition,
but I have to tell you
then
that
you have a problem.
We did this is an unscientific survey. If we can just throw it up real quick. It said, did Donald Trump, this is from Facebook, did Donald Trump do a good job defending his position to ban Muslims from entering the U.S.? 63% of those polled last night, this is 1.5 million people, said that he did do a good job. Over 37% said no. And when we asked, should we accept refugees from Syria, 31% said yes, 69% of those on Facebook. This is Facebook, again, an unscientific survey.
Then we have
it just
something
tells you
really bad.
Yes.
There's a pathology.
We'll continue to discuss. I've got to run now. I've got to run. Thank
really
you, guys.
Scary.
I'll have you back. You know that. You're both here all the time. Thank you very much. When we come right back, 18 million people heard.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.